Every woodworker wants to achieve nice shavings, clean work surfaces, ease of use, and control of the edge tools. In order to do that, we need to get sharp. As a new woodworker, especially with hand tools, I've been chasing these results. However, those like myself that have a touch of OCD will want to get organised first with something maybe like this. All the gear that was going to be used was laid out and measurements taken, then some marine ply cut to size. I had some reclaimed oak that I thought would make durable edge banding, which was cleaned up. A bunch of thin strips were cut at the table saw, then each strip was placed into a thin strip planing jig and all the saw marks removed. Each strip was cut to a rough length, sized and squared up at the shooting board. All the edges of the plywood panels were edge banded. I just used one of the glue spreaders I had and used the world's cheapest clamps, masking tape. To build the plate holder, the strips are simply mapped around the borders, placing one plate in at a time, then a dividing strip, then a plate, strip, and so on. At this point, you could stop and the basic holder is done. You could just use 3 plates, coarse, fine, and superfine, and that's all you need to get to sharp. However, I wanted to take it a bit further. One of the advantages of using these diamond plates is that the base is magnetic. So a finger recess was put in and cleaned up to protect my delicate digits. A recess drilled in at each end of the plate holder to accept some magnets. Snotty goop mixed up and the magnets dropped in place. Now I have the advantage of carrying and storing the plate holder in a vertical position without fear of dropping the plates. I wanted the diamond stones to have height above the bench for the handle of a chisel when flattening the back. Plus I had a few more components to fit to complete this sharpening station. For now I just have a piece of MDF cut to the same size as the diamond plates, which will be turned into a strop later. The plate holder is glued onto the base of the sharpening station, and once again strips were cut, glued and mapped around the components. I am using a trend guide for the chisel and plane blade setting, which was also mapped around until all boxed in. The back of the strop had some penny washers countersunk and screwed in, with magnets also installed into the sharpening station for a safe location. The roller on my honing guide failed on the edges, so a V-notch was needed for clearance. Throughout the project, all is being cleaned up. Trying always to take the opportunity to practice dovetailing, a box was made to store all the gear with a sliding lid. This is simply glued on the back of the sharpening station. A simple finger groove was put in on the back side to aid in handling. The fiddliest part was cutting some masking tape to cover the magnets before a coat of varnish was applied. To knock up the strop, the MDF was covered in some double-sided tape. The leather pinched at one end in the vise, stretched tightly, clamped in the vise, and all trimmed up. I have decided to use DMT diamond stones, coarse, fine, extra fine, and extra extra fine, which you can get in a 4000 or 8000 grit. You can stop at extra fine, which is about a 1200 grit. However, the 4000 satisfies those fussy people like myself, and I think it just takes it that little bit further. I'm certainly loving how the magnets allow me to store my sharpening station vertically, saving on some space. Now it's time to put this sharpening station to use, and the first thing is prepping a chisel. The back needs to be flat, so I swap out my plates starting with coarse. Lay the chisel downhill first, and with even pressure, move the chisel back and forth to create an even scratch pattern. My left hand applies downward pressure, while my right hand is just a guide. The station keeps the plate above the bench so that my chisel handle doesn't foul. To check your progress, you can mark the area with a Sharpie. It's helpful at times while going through the learning stage. As I go back and forth, I move across the diamond plate from right to left so that I don't leave a ridge on the back of the chisel. Working through all the grits until I get down to the extra fine, which I've found to be super nice to use. We only need to flatten the first ½ inch of the chisel. However, a combination of these chisels and the diamond plates, it was easy to get to a better result. This is a one-off process. The back of the chisel is never offered to a stone again. The manufacturers at DMT claim that you don't need to use any lube while honing, and if you do, just to use water, which I use most of the time. A simple lapping block is fashioned up out of some MDF, some metal polish applied. Keeping the chisel flat, polish the back. You can take this as far as you want to suit your own OCD levels. For me, this is more than good enough. The back is now complete and never has to be touched again. At the moment I am using this trend honing guide. The chisel is placed into the guide. The guide's roller set into the V groove in the setting plate. I already have a 25-degree primary bevel rough ground, so I set my chisel projection to the 30-degree mark and lock it in place. I offer the chisel to the diamond plate with even and light pressure, moving back and forth. I start on the coarse plate and keep working it until I detect a burr. Sharp is being two faces that meet to infinity. It is reliant on getting that burr. The most common mistake I made during this learning curve was giving up before the burr could be seen or felt. Without the burr, I haven't got a hope of being sharp. I am moving across the grits until I reach the fancy extra fine plate. This footage shows the 25-degree primary bevel, which has been rough ground, and the 30-degree secondary bevel, honed in by hand. Hopefully you can see my nail folding that burr back and forth. I didn't grind that primary bevel too well, but it certainly doesn't affect the performance. Being a new strop, it needs to be loaded with some sort of buffing compound. I use metal polish and found it's perfect for my needs. I don't strop a lot, and only 1 to 2 strokes on the back and about 10 strokes on the bevel side. Now it's time to test for sharp, and here I am able to cut across the grain, with the most important element to me is having control, which a sharp edge gives you. Now for plane irons. I think if you can, to be able to flatten the back of the plane iron is the best. However, this rarely happens. Here you can see the scratch patterns on the back of this blade, which means I have a lot to remove to get all the way across to the right hand edge. In this case we use the late great David Charlesworth ruler trick. The same steel rule is always used by placing it onto the outer edge of the plate, the plane blade on top, and with a few strokes create the slightest of back bevel, so less area is needed to be honed until an even scratch pattern is achieved. This slight back bevel needs to go from one edge of the blade to the other. Now the plane blade is placed into the honing guide and once again set to the 30-degree mark. Starting at the coarse stone with firm to light pressure, move back and forth until you detect that burr running across the entire length of the blade. Now all I do is work through all the grits, removing the old scratch patterns, creating a finer edge. When I reach the extra fine plate, I take strokes back and forth, and then I apply pressure to one corner of the blade and hone in a few strokes. Then one finger on the other extreme corner and take a few strokes. This creates enough of a camber as not to leave any plane tracks when planing. The same is copied on the extra fine plate. The blade is now offered to the strop. The burr removed with a few strokes on the back side and then a few on the bevel side. I watch that back bevel, and if I need to, I go back in and use the ruler trick. I have used water stones and other methods. However, these diamond plates from DMT and this trend honing guide have become my go-to method. And no, I am not a big enough channel to be paid to promote. It just might help you decide on what to try while going through your sharpening journey. There are a lot of methods and systems to get to sharp, and if you are starting out, it may seem a bit daunting. However, with a little practice, you will achieve sharp very quickly. I'm trying to get into freehand sharpening, but being a weekend woodworker, using a honing guide is the way to go, so as to enjoy using a sharp edge. I need to stop here, as I could plane this into an icy pole stick. For all those that have jumped on board and subscribed, it means a lot to be able to share my woodwork journey. So until next time, get out there and make and create. Thanks for watching.